Alien arrival. In the depths of space, the mighty Zorgan Empire reigned supreme. For millennia, the tentacled, gray-skinned Zorgans had conquered and subjugated countless alien races across the galaxy, their advanced technology and merciless tactics making them the most feared civilization in the known universe. Emperor Xarax, the cruel leader of the Zorgans, sat upon his obsidian throne on the imperial capital world of Zor Prime. His beady black eyes stared out at the stars, pondering which world to conquer next. A scaly advisor approached the throne and bowed low. "My Lord Emperor, our long-range scans have detected an inhabited world on the far edge of the galaxy, in a region called the Sol System," the advisor hissed. "The dominant species appears to be a bipedal race called humans. They are technologically primitive compared to us." Xarax tapped his sharp claws on the arm of his throne, intrigued. "Tell me more about these humans. Have they achieved interstellar travel?" The advisor shook his head. "No, my lord. They are limited to their own star system. Only recently have they begun to send crude probes to explore their neighboring planets. They pose no threat to the Zorgan Empire." A cruel smile spread across Xarax's lipless mouth, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Then perhaps it is time we paid them a visit and showed them the might of the Zorgans. Ready the conquest fleet." As the advisor scurried off to carry out the Emperor's orders, Xarax allowed himself a low chuckle. These primitive humans would be no match for the unstoppable Zorgan military machine. Soon, their pitiful mudball of a planet would be just another subjugated world in his glorious empire, its people toiling as slaves. Conquering them would be child's play. Little did Emperor Xarax realize that he had just made the most fateful decision in Zorgan history, one that would ultimately bring about the downfall of his species and the end of their intergalactic reign of terror. For in his arrogance, he had tragically underestimated the humans of Earth. Invasion begins. Alarm klaxons blared through the NASA control room as technicians scrambled frantically between computer monitors, wide-eyed with disbelief and terror. On the main screen, dozens of blurry objects could be seen emerging from the inky blackness of space, growing larger by the second as they approached Earth. There was no mistaking the artificial nature of these objects. They were alien spaceships, and they were coming in fast. "NORAD confirms bogies in high Earth orbit," a technician yelled. "They just appear out of nowhere, and their numbers keep growing." "Dear God," the ashen-faced NASA director whispered. "It's an invasion. Alert the White House and the Pentagon. We need to muster every defense we've got." Similar scenes were playing out in every space agency and military facility across the globe as the terrible reality sunk in. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and the neighbors hadn't come in peace. Earth had been invaded by a hostile alien force that made their technological might apparent. F-35 fighter jets took to the skies to bravely engage the alien ships, but were vaporized in an instant by crackling purple energy beams. Tanks and artillery batteries opened fire futilely as the invaders effortlessly shrugged off everything humanity threw at them. Then, in a horrific display of power clearly meant to crush the spirit of the human resistance, the alien ships turned their weapons on Earth's major cities. Searing lances of purple energy rained down from the heavens, setting metropolises ablaze. New York, London, Moscow, Tokyo, Shanghai, Paris, Chicago. The names of the fallen cities piled up within hours as smokestacks rose from blackened craters that had once been thriving urban centers. Casualty reports coming in from around the world quickly numbered in the tens of millions. Humanity wailed in agony as its mightiest nations fell to their knees before the unstoppable onslaught. Some world leaders desperately tried to broadcast messages of surrender to the aliens, hoping to spare what remained of their people. No response came from the attackers. Among the ruins of the shattered cities, ash-covered human survivors crawled from the wreckage of collapsed buildings, weeping and shell-shocked. Many fled to the hills and the countryside in a mass exodus, seeking any refuge from the alien assault. Others hid in subway tunnels and bomb shelters, praying the invaders wouldn't burrow after them. In the command carrier of the Zorgan fleet, Emperor Xarax cackled with sadistic glee as his screen showed the utter devastation his forces had unleashed on the humans. The primitives' feeble armies had been swept aside like insects, their great cities now nothing but smoldering ruins. "This farce of a war will be over in days," Xarax gloated to his generals. "Once the humans see our ground troops marching through their streets, they'll capitulate and beg to serve us. Ready the troop transports for landing." And so, as the sun set on the worst day in human history and the world burned under alien bombardment, Zorgan infantry and vehicles streamed down from the skies to occupy the blasted hellscape that Earth had become. The few surviving military forces could only watch helplessly from hidden positions as the alien jackboots marched into the ruins of once great cities, gigantic purple flags bearing the twisted emblem of the Zorgan Empire unfurling over the rubble to signal their conquest. Humanity was on its knees, apparently broken and about to be shackled with the chains of alien servitude. But in the hearts of a tenacious few, a flicker of resistance still smoldered, waiting to be fanned to life again. Resistance rises. In a hidden, heavily fortified bunker 100 meters beneath the Rocky Mountains, an emergency meeting was taking place among the few ranking U.S. military leaders who had survived the aliens' initial bombardment. Their faces were tired and grim, but a determined fire shone in their eyes. They knew that the decisions made in this room would determine the fate of the human race. "We need to let the world know that the United States isn't out of the fight," declared General John McNabb, an old warhorse of a man. "That humanity won't go quietly into the dark night of alien domination. We've been bloodied, but we're far from defeated." "What do you propose?" asked Admiral Karen Stark in a clipped tone. "Our conventional forces were decimated in the first hours of the attack. We've got some naval assets in reserve and a handful of ICBMs, but those damned alien ships seem to shrug off anything we throw at them. How do we even begin to fight back?" McNabb slapped his palms on the table. "Conventional warfare got us nowhere. The only way we're going to beat these ugly tentacled bastards is by resorting to guerrilla tactics. We go underground, link up with any NATO troops or local militias still kicking out there, and we bleed the alien occupiers with relentless hit-and-run attacks. Death by 1,000 cuts." As if on cue, a steel side door to the conference room slid open, and in strode two figures. One was an imposing, chiseled man with close-cropped graying hair, dressed in well-worn combat fatigues. The other was an attractive but severe-looking woman in her early 40s with dark hair pulled back in a bun, clad in a slightly rumpled lab coat over jeans and a t-shirt. "I think that's where we come in," the man said, his voice a low, confident rumble. "Jack Reese, Delta Forces commander. Just spent the last 72 hours linking up guerrilla cells across the Midwest. Ready and willing to take the fight to ET." The woman also stepped forward. "And I'm Dr. Sarah Holden, Chief of Xenotechnology Research at DARPA. I'll be working to dissect what's left of their strange technology for any weaknesses to exploit." Reese and Holden had not met face-to-face until this moment, but they had already been coordinating extensively via the few secure comms channels still available. Together, this unlikely soldier-slash-scientist duo would go on to mastermind the human resistance against the Zorgan forces. Over the following weeks and months, small groups of human fighters began to strike from the shadows, attacking vital Zorgan outposts and supply depots before fading back into the wilderness. Many of these resistance cells were composed of a motley mix of bloodied U.S. troops, patriotic militiamen, and even civilian volunteers from all walks of life. Their goal was not to win pitched battles against superior alien forces, but simply to survive, slowly sap enemy strength, and let the invaders know that subjugating humanity would not be easy. Dr. Holden and her science teams worked around the clock to try and decipher the aliens' advanced technology. From the burnt-out hulks of downed Zorgan fighters and abandoned weaponry, they began to glean insights into the physics behind the invaders' apparent technological advantage. Though progress was slow and frustrating at times, Holden became convinced that the aliens' reliance on certain rare Earth elements for their energy weapons and propulsion systems could potentially be exploited. Meanwhile, Reese led raid after daring raid into Zorgon-held territory. His grizzled Delta veterans quickly training local resistance forces in the arts of guerrilla combat. Though human losses were often high in these operations, they began to yield vital intelligence through captured alien equipment or prisoners. In his imposing command ship orbiting the barren, burnt husk of Earth, Emperor Xerax seethed with frustration at scattered reports of Turan natives continuing to resist the occupation, in defiance of all logic and sense. Isolated attacks by primitives wielding scavenged weaponry posed little tactical threat to Xerax's mighty war machine, but the brazen effrontery and stubbornness of the insurgents galled the Emperor immensely. Burn their forests, poison their lakes, round up their sniveling spawn as hostages. Xerax railed to his underlings. I want those few surviving pests crushed under our heel once and for all. But the humans would not oblige Xerax by being crushed so easily. For the first time in the Zorgon Empire's long reign of conquest, they found themselves facing a resilient foe who simply refused to submit or stop fighting, even in the face of overwhelming odds and horrific casualties. The stage was set for a long and brutal struggle, pitting Zorgon brute strength against Turan wit and resolve. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and so too, perhaps, the fate of the galaxy. Turning the tide. As the guerrilla war raged on, Sarah Holden and her tireless science teams finally achieved a major breakthrough. While the physics behind most of the aliens' technology remained maddeningly out of reach, Holden discovered a potential vulnerability in the power systems of the Zorgon's mechs and fighters. The crystalline power matrix that fuels each of their combat vehicles has an oscillating frequency in the high terahertz range. Holden explained breathlessly to Jack Reese in the dimly lit underground lab serving as her makeshift research facility. In theory, if we could build a directed EMP emitter tuned to that exact frequency, it should overload and fry those power crystals, meaning their walking tanks and attack ships would be dead in the water, without needing to put a scratch on their hulls. Reese finished, an eager grin breaking over his chiseled features. Hot damn, Doc, you may have just found our magic bullet. What do you need to make it happen? Holden's brow creased with concern. Well, that's the catch. In order to build a useful number of these EMP emitters, I'm going to need a larger sample size of intact Zorgon power crystals to calibrate the devices with, and those can only be found inside the bellies of the alien beasts. Got it. Reese nodded grimly. I'll round up my best men and raid one of their bases tonight. With any luck, we'll bring you back plenty of alien guts to play around with. As risky as Reese's daring raid was, it proved a rousing success. His hand-picked team managed to infiltrate the Zorgon mech depot, overpower the guards in brutal close-quarters combat, and extract several fully intact power cores from the towering war machines before the aliens could deploy reinforcements. With this treasure trove of purloined parts, Holden's team worked around the clock to construct their EMP cannons. Field testing proved the devices highly effective against Zorgon armor, capable of shorting out entire formations of the aliens' previously impervious vehicles with a single electromagnetic pulse. For the first time since the invasion began, the human resistance had a weapon capable of leveling the playing field. Reese, Holden, and the other leaders quickly moved to mass-produce the EMP cannons and distribute them to resistance cells worldwide, along with instructions on how to build more. The resulting wave of surprise attacks on Zorgon forces resulted in the worst defeats the alien Imperium had suffered in centuries. In one particularly humiliating rout, a rebel group in the Rocky Mountains lured a Zorgon mech column into a narrow canyon, then used EMP cannons to immobilize the walkers. Follow-up attacks with salvaged plasma rifles and demolition charges finished the job, and the once invincible alien fighting machines burned as their crews roasted alive inside them. The string of losses infuriated Emperor Xerax. In a rage, he ordered a retaliatory bombardment that reduced several vacant human cities to smoking rubble. But he also recalled most of his fleet into high orbit in a defensive posture and commanded his generals to refrain from deploying mechs until this new human weapon could be countered. For Jack Reese, this was the opening he had been waiting and planning for. Their air support and armor have thinned out with most of the fleet bugging out and their mechs stuck in their bases. Now's our chance to take the fight directly to the Zorgan HQ while their guard is down. Around the globe, resistance cells received word to prepare for a coordinated final offensive against the alien occupiers. Troops and freedom fighters armed with Holden's new EMP cannons, captured Zorgan plasma rifles, and conventional human weapons streamed in from dozens of hidden camps to marshalling points outside key enemy bases. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. Either humanity would succeed in breaking the back of the Zorgan occupation in one glorious hammer blow, or Xarax would crush the resistors in detail as they exposed themselves after months of hiding. The fate of Earth would be decided in the next 24 hours. Final assault. Around the globe, on the prearranged signal, dozens of human assault groups burst from concealment to storm the Zorgan's main bases in the shattered ruins of the world's once great cities. It was a coordinated onslaught that caught the overconfident alien invaders off guard. Spearheading the attack on the Zorgan HQ complex in occupied Denver was none other than Jack Reese, leading a battalion of his toughest fighters armed to the teeth with EMP cannons and alien plasma weaponry. Meanwhile, Sarah Holden and her team worked out of a mobile command van, tracking the course of the battle and rapidly repositioning forces where needed. The fighting was brutal and chaotic as Terran resistance forces crashed into hastily assembled Zorgan barricades. Purple-hued plasma bolts crisscrossed with chattering AK-47 fire and the sizzling arcs of EMP blasts, all wreathed in billowing smoke and pulverized concrete dust. But Reese's troops were hungry for payback after months of hardship under alien occupation. They smashed through the Zorgan outer defenses, taking heavy casualties but spurred on by battle fury. Jack himself was a one-man army, blasting through alien warriors in close-quarters combat. Meanwhile, high above Earth, Emperor Xarax watched the disaster unfolding on his view-screens with bulging eyes and flaring nostril slits. He pounded a scaly fist on his floating throne's armrest as the tactical holomap flashed angry red with the locations of faltering Zorgan units. All ships, commence planetary bombardment. Raise their cities to ash. The Emperor screamed, flecks of foam flying from his jaws. We'll scour every one of those barbaric primates from the surface of this wretched world. But before the Zorgan fleet could reposition to unleash their doomsday salvo, the Emperor's command ship juddered and the lights flickered. Xarax looked around wildly as his stricken vessel's sirens wailed. Report. What's happening? In her ad hoc mobile command center, Sarah Holden pumped a fist in weary elation. Her team's hacking efforts and precisely positioned transmission beams had just paid off. We're in their systems. Alien command ship and fleet vessels operating systems compromised. Shutting down.